Peter Eliades with you to do an update for the end of this week. The date is September 6th, a holiday shortened weekend with Labor Day on Monday. There was theoretically no market action. There are no holidays anymore with Globex. These markets are trading all the time. But anyway, let's get right to the market because this was an important week. And today was, I believe, a very important day. We've been showing you this chart for a few days now, and either we're dead wrong about it or we're going to be dead right about the importance of this chart. This is what happened today. We told you yesterday we were about 700 units below. That was below yesterday's trend line. Trend line's moving up about 50 or 60 points a day. So yesterday's upper channel was at 251,651. That's 251,651. And we closed today, as you can see, right on the right-hand side here, at 251,262. 3 or 400 units below that. The important thing to note, however, was that today's high of the day there was a spread of 848 units on the AD lines, advances minus declines, and that would have taken you virtually exactly up to where the line was today. Today's upper channel, 251,708. So as you can see, still a little bit below this line, but for all practical purposes, you can't see anything visually there. I'll try and bring this across a little bit to have you. That doesn't blow it up too much, but at least you can see there's virtually no daylight here at all. That's almost a perfect hit of the upper channel of almost an 8-year-long upper channel on the daily advanced decline line. Let me show you the beginning of that channel so you can see how far back this goes. This channel begins in October of 2011. So you draw a line October 2011 through February of 2016. That's the slope of the gain here. You take that slope and move it up as a parallel line to the July 1st of 2014 high, and look what happens after that. We've shown you this before, but it's impressive enough to show you again. This is January of 18, virtually exact hit, upper channel line. This is September of 18, virtually exact hit, upper channel line. Now, mind you, some indexes were making important tops that they've never surpassed as these lines were being hit. At this point 4, the New York Composite Index, all the stocks on the New York Stock Exchange, hit its all-time high and has not since gone higher. At this point 5, several of the secondary stock indexes, I think the Russell 2000, reached its high right here and has not gone higher. And then you see points, there are a couple of points with 6 here. This is the July high, didn't quite get up to the line. But today, almost for all practical purposes, almost fully meeting that line. I think that is very, very important. And to back that up, we're going to show you now some of the weekly projection charts, which we've been featuring over the last few weeks. Let's start out with the nominal 20-week projections. These are 10-week offsets. This wide, bold green line here is a 10-week offset, which we use to get nominal 20-week projections. Notice that the Dow fell below that a couple of weeks ago, and despite the rally this week, remains below the line, which means that the nominal 20-week downside projections on the Dow remain in effect. 24,174 rounded off, and 24,760 rounded off. So the DJIA did not get above that offset line, the 10-week offset line, that would have invalidated that downside projection. Let's take a look at the S&P 500. There's a slightly different story here, as you can see. The S&P this week did indeed get just above this offset line. You can't really tell it unless you zoom in on it, which is what we're going to do now. But you can see the median for the week was just above the offset line. In light of other things we're going to show you, this is about the only index that has done that, so it might not be convincing, but it did happen and we have to respect it. So on the S&P, the median closed just above the offset, and that invalidated the downside projection that had been given down into this rectangular box here. And that it gave a new upside projection also by getting back above the line to at least 3011. So a lot of times these regained projections don't come to be, but we always like to look at them because they give us important information. Mind you, as you can see, these highs here already got into the previous projection box for the S&P that called for 2980 to 3121 rounded off. So that's the S&P, and that did get very barely above that projection line. Let's take a look now at the 20-week offsets for the nominal 40-week projections. Take a look at this one. This is really close too. This is the Dow. It had been below the 20-week offset for 2 consecutive weeks, and this week, let's zoom in and see what happened. It remained below. So for the Dow, both the 10-week offset and the 20-week offset, the Dow remains below. So no new projections have been given and no invalidations of the downside projections that remain in effect on the Dow. This one calls for 24,120, a minimum of 24,120 to a high side of 24,716 on the downside projections for the Dow. Let's take a look at this same offset and the S&P 500. Perhaps you recall from last week that the S&P never went below the 20-week offset, never invalidated this upside projection. So theoretically, at least, this projection remains in effect, calling for 3113 to 3283 rounded off on the S&P. So there are obviously contradictions between the Dow and the S&P. And when something like that happens, we try to settle those contradictions. There's no perfect way of doing it, of course, but we try to settle those contradictions by looking at my most favorite and most consistently accurate projection generator, and that's the New York Composite Index. So let's take a look now at that. This is a slightly different picture, as you can see. The New York Composite downside projections were generated almost 3 weeks ago. And here's the projection window here, 11,721 to 11,999, or make it 12,000 even. And those projections remain in effect because, as you can see, the median remains well below that offset line. In fact, even the close here on the New York was slightly below the offset line. So the New York Composite Index tells us that these projections, or this projection to the downside, remains in effect with the 10-week offset for the nominal 20-week projection. Let's take a look at the 20-week offset for the nominal 40-week projection. Here's the New York Composite Index with its 20-week offset for nominal 40-week projections. And again, same thing happened here. The median for the week, the midpoint of the high and low for the week on the New York Composite Index, remains well below the offset line. And the close for the week was right about on the offset line. So next week, if you get follow through to the upside, you could indeed invalidate. That has not happened as yet. And so for all practical purposes, this downside projection remains in effect, also calling for 11,989 to 12,219 on the New York Composite Index. So next, we're going to look at why next week is so important. This is the New York Composite again, and this is a shorter offset. This is a 5-week offset for nominal 10-week projections. We closed right here. Next week's bar is going to be this line right in here. This is where it is space-wise. So even a sideways move, even to a little bit down next week, could cross above this downside the downtrending offset and give a nominal 10-week projection up into the area of recent new highs for the New York. And when we show you the S&P and the Dow, you'll see they could be new all-time highs. Let's take a look at them. This is the DJIA. This is where it closed this week. This is next week right here. will be a bar that's formed right here. As you can see next week, excuse me, I went out one too far. It's going to be right here next week. But as you can see, we close right here. So if we open around there next week, you can have a fairly significant decline and still remain above these offset lines. In this case, it's basically a single offset line of 5 weeks, but the new software sets it up slightly differently. But that would give a new upside projection, and most likely, you can simply count the squares here, 1, 2, and about a quarter, and 1, 2, and a quarter from here would take you up into just about new all-time high territory. So that's why next week becomes so important. It's important, if we're not going to go to new all-time highs, to significantly begin, or to begin a significant downside decline. Let's look at the S&P. Virtually the same thing with the S&P. S&P closed here. Next week's bar is going to be right here. So you need to come down significantly to avoid giving a nominal 10-week upside projection. And again, you count down, and the crossing would occur, if we even go sideways next week, crossing would occur around here somewhere. That's down 1, 2, and almost a half bars. Another 2.5 bars up takes you pretty darn close to the 3,100 level on the S&P. That's why it's so important to watch the action next week. I'm going to repeat this chart one more time, perhaps emphasize to you how important it is to me, and I believe the overall market. Usually, all-time highs in the advanced decline line are not all-time highs in the market. When I say usually, I mean almost always. The rare exception, one of the very rare exceptions, was 1976. I think we mentioned that yesterday. So the fact that the daily AD line of the New York Stock Exchange has made a new all-time high, for an orthodox technician, would be rated very bullish, at least telling you that the popular indexes and averages have not reached new highs, because you don't see the daily AD line go to a new all-time high and not have the other market indexes catch up and go to a high after that. That's almost always an invariable thing, but not perfect record. As I said, 1976 proved to the contrary. That's it for us this week, a very important week next week. Please, again, go to the bottom right of your screen on YouTube. There's a tiny little red banner down there. Click that red banner, and that will notify you. You'll become a subscriber. There's no charges involved. We're doing these right now gratis. So you become a subscriber, and you'll be notified of future updates. Have yourselves a great weekend, and thanks a lot for watching.